Welcome to episode 19 of The Putting Couch, brought to you by the SeeMore Putter Company's tour team. I'm Jim Grunberg, along with Cody Hale and Ted Galena and Pat O'Brien, actually the fourth member of our tour team. Boy, we wish he was out there every single week for us, but we know he can't be. POB, great to have you back on The Putting Couch. This is episode 19, and we love having you on.
Happy Monday to you, fellas. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's always Monday somewhere, right?
Or at least it feels like.
Exactly. So, if any of our listeners want to go back, Pat O'Brien is SeeMore's global teaching ambassador. He's been with SeeMore longer than any of us have, really, since his friendship with Payne Stewart led into him becoming sort of the foremost teaching authority and coaching authority on how to use the SeeMore putter to make any golfer putt better. And that's been over 20 years, Pat. Golfers and listeners that want to go back and catch up on some of the stuff we've already done with you, Pat. Episode 10, we talked about the fundamentals of the grip. In episode 14, we talked about alignment. So today, episode 19, we'll continue the fundamental theme. What are we going to talk about, Pat?
Well, Jimmy, today I thought we'd cover posture, and then that'll sort of segue into ball position too. We can knock those two out pretty easily.
Okay, fantastic. So you're the director of instruction at Lakewood Country Club in Dallas, Texas. Anybody in the Texas area that wants to reach out to you would be able to do that, and you can garner a putting lesson with one of the world's foremost putting instructors. If you can do that and it's within your budget and you're crazy about the game and you want to be better, contact Pat O'Brien. But Pat, tell us right now how with your students. You started with the grip and you talked about alignment, and at this point in time, you're trying to go from there. Is this still the same initial lesson, or have you moved on? Is this something that's a follow-up?
So, okay, the basic premise, if everybody remembers, or if you're new to this, is that your body's designed to move in a certain natural way, and the putter is weighted to swing a certain natural way. And if you put those two together, the putting stroke's going to happen without thought. The putter's going to return to square through impact without thought. And that's the cool part about this. So my job as a teacher is to get somebody into a relatively neutral setup that includes grip, that includes obviously alignment. And so now we're on posture and ball position, and posture is really, I mean, obviously it's a huge fundamental, and we're dealing with old paradigms when it comes to posture, because if you all remember, you probably heard this since you've been golfing, that you want to get your eyes over the ball when you putt. And that came about when greens were grainy, slow Bermuda, and everybody would sort of hunker down and crowd the ball, and it was easy to really make a wristy pop-like stroke and get the ball, airborne above the grain essentially, and give it enough force, so to speak, to get the ball to the hole and to keep it on line. So agronomy changed back in about 1981. Augusta National introduced bent grass greens, and that started a revolution. And so greens got better, and putting strokes essentially started to change just based on posture. They became more of a fluid motion, and posture is a huge component to that. So that's what I'm looking for. Sometimes there's right away is what kind of posture you have. Can you make a free motion? And then we'll talk about that with my student.
And is it fair to say, Pat, that most of the better players in the world, we watch them play at various tour events, or even if you went to the college level, you're going to see a lot of really good looking putting strokes. You're going to watch these great golfers and you're going to say, wow, their putting stroke, it doesn't look at all like mine. It's so smooth. It's so fluid. So what you're really trying to do is help your students, who many of which have become tied up in these old myths and these old ways of doing things, and they don't realize that they can go and build a better putting stroke. So that's really what you do. Work with a lot of tour players as well. So obviously they need fine tuning, but your promise is to help average golfers really start to do the fundamental things in their putting that some of the best players in the world are already doing.
Absolutely, Jim. Tiger Woods has always been the model, really. He's still a great putter. And back when he came on the scene, he had really good posture in everything he did, but it really stood out with the putter. He was not crouched over. He was tall and athletic and relaxed, and he just looked like he was going to make putts. So that's what you want to follow. What we do, and you guys do it as well, is I have a weighted ball that weighs 2 pounds. You can use a water bottle if you're at home. Just get a full plastic water bottle or something that weighs about a pound or two. And this is going to teach you leverage. If you stand up in a reasonably athletic position and you let that bottle hang from your, in your arms from your shoulders, you can make a pretty fluid putting stroke, no problem. And then conversely, if you bend over a little bit more and let that bottle drag you down to the ground and maybe tuck it underneath you a little more and try to get your eyes over the ball to mimic that posture, you're going to find right away that number one, the bottle is more heavy. You lose your leverage over it. And number two, you can't make a very fluid stroke. It's going to break down either on the way back or on the way through. So that's what I'll do with people just to illustrate leverage and how easy it is to move freely when you have good posture. And good posture doesn't mean that you have to be rigid or stick your butt out or anything like that. It's more of just letting your chest be tall and long, let your arms hang comfortably, and just fall into the balls of your feet. And so that's what I'm looking for with posture.
Pat, you mentioned Tiger as an example, and we all know how good he was under pressure, and how much of the stroke is comes from a solid setup and a solid foundation. What are some of the key characteristics you see of most amateur golfers that they struggle with in posture?
I think that the old paradigm's one because somebody somewhere along the line either told them or they read that you got to get your eyes over the ball. So I'm either going to crowd the ball with decent posture, but then my arms can't swing, or I'm going to try to get my eyes over the ball and I'm going to bend from my waist too much and then get a little bit stuck. So that's probably the biggest influence through the years that I've seen. And so the beauty of it, Cody, is it's just such a simple fix. The first thing you do is you get your chest longer. And once you do that, then your posture is pretty much set. So if your chest is a little bit longer, you're not so hunched over from the shoulders, then that's going to create the freedom of movement. And it's no more complicated than that, really.
POB, one thing I learned from you is what you mentioned, the fundamentals of golf has been lost in putting, and you brought that back to the forefront with everyone. And being an instructor, I think many instructors they try to fix the putting stroke, the action, instead of the posture. And what I found out through you is that what you're trying to accomplish with the stroke, it's very easily done. And you said it just a few minutes ago that if you fix the posture and then everything else sort of falls into place, and it's sort of now everything goes hand to hand. So that's one thing I learned from you is that if you just make that simple change and explain to them why we like your posture this way, this is what the stroke is going to happen when we do that, then all of a sudden, I think the student gets it and understands it and starts, making this putting stroke a whole lot easier.
You're right, Ted. They can feel it right away. As soon as you correct the posture and have them make some practice strokes, they feel the freedom right away. And then you can put them back in the old posture and they feel that restriction right away too. A sports psychologist told me a long time ago that when you're under pressure, the instinct, the primitive instinct in your brain, your limbic system, is to take you back into the fetal position, so to protect you. So let's say you're, in a competition or you have to make a putt, and I see this all the time. You get closer to your work, essentially. You hunker down, get closer to it, get your eyes over it in an effort to, I guess, primitively protect yourself and also to really try to control the action. And it doesn't seem to work out very often. You put undue pressure on the putter, literally. You lean on it so it doesn't swing freely. And you just send a message to your body that you're under stress. So you can break that cycle really easily. Just take a deep breath and remind yourself to get back up and be athletic and confident. And then the stroke will follow from there.
POB, in that nice athletic posture you told me one time is, a lot of people nowadays are in their office or they're driving a car and their shoulders are very hunched over. Jim's doing it right now. He's stretching his shoulders out. You talked about, tucking your elbows in, having your palms up to the sky, and that sort of stretches out that back muscle there. And then all of a sudden, it loosens up a little bit. When I give them, that sort of simple drill or stretch to do, they sort of feel that and know, oh man, I am hunched over on the computer all day long. And that's sort of how my putting stroke is. And so once you sort of roll your shoulders back, they're freed up a little bit more. And just that simple movement of maybe 1 to 2 inches just frees that person up to make, again, a much more fluid stroke.
You're right on the money, Ted. Yes, occupational hazard, working for a living, sitting at a desk can really wreak havoc on your golf game. And absolutely, you can open your palms and stretch your shoulders back. You don't really want to pull your shoulders back when you putt because that creates tension, but just getting them to stretch and loosen up your pecs, that's a great idea. And, you see people that have been working in an office for years and years, and they're the kyphosis in the upper back are just really hunched, and the neck's in a funny position. The pelvis is tucked underneath them, and it's we're not meant to sit for a living. We're meant to move. So even if you're working at a desk, the best thing I could advise you to do is every 15-30 minutes just get up and stretch. Just get your chest long again, and that'll get your tailbone back to neutral and not so tucked underneath you, and then just go for a walk for a couple minutes and reset. I have people do something called original strength, which is, you can find it online. It's just reset exercises that basically are hardwired into our DNA. You're going back and doing exactly what you did when you were a baby. You start on your back, and then you eventually figure out how to roll over, and then you get up on your knees and rock, and then eventually you walk. So when you go back and do these primitive patterns again, it awakens your reflexive core, and your posture gets reset pretty much automatically. So I have people do this. I do it every day, and it doesn't take very long, and it's super simple. So if people out there want to Google original strength, that is a great resource to get your posture just to where it should be in life. And then you don't have to necessarily think about it when you're performing an athletic movement.
When you do that, Pat, do you find your students have to have a little bit of a longer putter because of that when the posture's changed, or do you work with the original putter that they have? How do you combat that length when you start making that posture change?
And another great point, Ted. And that, putting lessons lead into fittings, and fittings lead into putting lessons. And so when we really talk about the setup and how to get neutral, oftentimes a putter is too short for somebody because, again, they've been told to get their eyes over the ball, and they're hunched over. So sometimes it requires an adjustment in length. I don't very often see a putter that's too long. I'll see it occasionally, but not very often. But however, if you're attempting to get into a better posture, and let's say your putter is too long, then you don't really like that feeling of your elbows up against your side, gator armed almost. And so instinctively, you're going to back away from the ball. So if you have good posture and your putter is too long for you, your eyes will be way too far inside the ball. So I see that sometimes, and more often than not, I just see a putter that's too short, and they're gonna lean over too much or get too close to it, trying to make it work. So yes, fitting is a huge component of posture.
You mentioned that people want to get closer to their work, and so I think that's a great analogy. So you're out there and you're under pressure. You really, really want to make the putt. And so instinctively, you just get closer and closer to it. You get closer to the ball. And I know you've talked about the fact that it does seem logical to people that getting closer to something, you'd be able to see the line better. You'd be able to see everything better. But, you've talked about the fact that because in golf and with putting, you're standing to the side of the ball, that sort of changes everything. Can you work that thought in here?
Sure. The last podcast we talked about alignment, and I encourage people to get on a hardwood floor at home. Just get on some clear, clean lines on the ground that you can really start to see what square is and see how to look at your target. And then you can do an experiment from there. If you get your eyes over the ball and then you look down your line, oftentimes the line where it's leading, let's say, to a hole, for example, is going to your perception, look like it's too far to the left. It's too far behind you. And then if you get your posture correct and you get your eyes right around the heel of the putter, then when you look down your line, everything's out in front of you where it should be. So imagine walking into a ball and getting your eyes over the ball, and as soon as you look at your target, consciously you might get confused. Subconsciously, I can guarantee you that you're a little bit confused and then therefore tense, and things aren't matching up. So, Jimmy, it's you get on the road essentially to the yips when you have poor posture, because it's a domino effect. And let me touch on that really briefly. The yips come from fear and basically putting pressure literally on the putter. So imagine a scenario where you've been doing this for a while, where you hunker over the ball and then unwittingly you're putting your body weight on the putter, literally leaning on it, and then you don't make a very good stroke, and then you look at the target and it doesn't look right, so you start to get tense, and then you make a really bad stroke, and then you make another really bad stroke, and then all of a sudden fear starts kicking in. So maybe you get closer to your work then, and then maybe you get a little more tense, maybe you push your thumbs down on the putter and make it even heavier. And then before you know it, you're in a situation where there's just fear coursing through your body, and you're going to have to make a fix at impact. And that's the genesis of the yips. If somebody keeps going down that road, that's where it happens, basically. So we can avoid a lot of bad things down the road, just number one, by getting taller, not leaning on the putter, and then having the alignment match up. Just then you can let it swing and you'll never have the yips, essentially.
Pat, I love the way you mentioned that, and building off of what Jim said, we see, I think one of the most common errors in terms of stroke wise we see from amateur golfers is they take the putter outside on the takeaway and inside on the follow through. And a lot of it, in my opinion, or from what we've seen, is through poor posture, trying to get over the ball, and they get, like you said, through trying to get more control of the putter, they get closer to it, they try to get their eyes over it. So it's almost like they become restricted. Do you feel once you get somebody in the right posture, and in the right eye position, length, or a putter goes along with that, do you feel like they're able to stay more connected since they're freer? They don't really have to use or activate their hands as much. So therefore, like you said, they're probably not going to, the Y word's not going to come into effect at all, because they're able to use more solid core muscles. And I think one time you mentioned to me, under pressure, small muscles are going to break down more easily, where your bigger muscles are going to hold up under pressure and be able to, form more repeatable motion. Is that something that you agree with?
Yeah, 100%, Cody. If somebody's listening to this podcast and they just stand up and get in a reasonably athletic posture and just place their hands together, you don't even need a putter. Just place them together right where they meet in the middle of your body. You're going to notice a couple of things. Number one, your left arm's free. It's not stapled up against you. This will segue into ball position in a second. And from that setup, if you just let your hands and arms and shoulders swing, it's a very natural motion. You're not going to have too much excessive wrist hinge. You're not going to really putt with your shoulders, because then if you try to rock your shoulders, you're inducing tension. But basically, to start a putting stroke, what moves first? Well, I'm not really sure, but I know it's a natural sequence. It's the head has the furthest to travel, so that would mean the hands have the second furthest to travel, and then the arms, and then the tips of the shoulders, not necessarily behind the shoulders. So that's about as simple as you can make it, and it's a natural sequence. That's the beauty of it. So all that stuff gets worked out. You don't have to create undue tension. You don't have to push down on the putter and grip it to death. You can just stand up there confidently, and everything's going to move the way it should if you let it. We can't make it any more simple than that.
So really, you need a level of trust. First of all, the student has to trust you, and I wish more thousands of people would tune into this, to this putting couch, because it's crazy to get to the right posture. Obviously, you first of all have to trust that the grip is there for one reason, to let the putter kind of do its work, right? And then from an alignment perspective, you have to trust the fact that while it's counterintuitive, standing to the side of the ball at the right distance will actually allow you to take a free-flowing, repetitive, consistent stroke that will deliver the club face to square more often than trying to get closer to the work. And then once you buy into that, now all of a sudden the rest of it falls into place. You'll be a great putter, but a lot of it is counterintuitive. And so that's why the instructor part comes in so importantly here, or at least seeking knowledge, which we're trying to offer.
Well, they do it all on the full swing, right? We teach it on the full swing, so why not teach it on the putting stroke? Instead, it's just student, go find out, whatever works best, whatever feels good, let's go with that.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. You've heard me say that before. Fundamentals of putting have gotten a free pass for a long time. And I'm not saying you can't putt the other way. You can't hunker down and make it work. And I see that happen. And if first of all, if somebody's doing that and they're making putts, they're never going to come see me anyway, because they're happy with their putting. I usually see the ones where they're not happy. So, but there are plenty of guys out there that aren't 100% conventional. Let's say natural athletic posture, and they make it work. And if you see them on TV, that they have superior hand-eye coordination and time to do it. And if you see them at your local golf course, same thing. They've been doing it for a while. It works for them. So it's about matchups, and I get that. But boy, if you don't have a lot of time and you've not had success the other way, grab a water bottle, stand up tall and relaxed, nothing crazy, and then just let that bottle move, and you're going to feel how easy it is, and then just go from there.
But I've seen even students with you and with Cody and Ted that, on the other hand, a lot of golfers probably may feel like they're a little bit better than they are at putting, because it's when you're not putting that well, it's really, sometimes it's not that disastrous, right? And sometimes people aren't paying attention that much. But I've seen even a lot of golfers that came in and, would probably tell you, hey, they're a great putter, everything's real good. But at the same time, once they spend time with you or Cody or Ted and going through some of these fundamental checks, they realize there's a lot further they could be going.
You're right. Yeah, it's, when you impart some information to somebody, if it's right, if it's easy, if it's natural, it's more likely to resonate with somebody. Conversely, if I taught everybody that comes in to get their eyes over the ball and hunker down, I probably wouldn't be a very successful teacher, because it just doesn't resonate. The proof's in the pudding. You can compare both, and you're obviously 99 out of 100 times you're going to find that it's just easier, and they get it right away.
POB, segueing into ball position, and we know how important a consistent ball position is, but I think that's one thing when giving a lesson of trying to, when I talk to a student or player, showing them just how important a consistent ball position is, in that it plays a great deal of not only your posture and your grip, but what the actual putting stroke is, the feel, the sound, and the roll coming off that golf ball. Talk to our listeners about how important that ball position is in a putting stroke, and how consistent you want that to be with them each and every time they make a putting stroke.
Sure. Yes. So let's go back to the model. Well, let me start by saying that, a lot of times people have heard that you need to get the ball in the middle of your stance, and that's a common refrain that I hear. And so therefore the ball's in the middle and the putter's too far back. So what that does is that traps your left arm. It doesn't swing freely, and you also are more likely to catch the ball too early on the arc, and so it leads to a host of problems. You go back to the water bottle model, and you just stand up and you put your arms together and you have a bottle in your hands. What I want you to notice is your left arm's free. If you always cater to your left arm and you let that hang freely, then you eliminate resistance in your stroke for the most part. Because if your left arm's free and you let it swing, you're going to notice it rotates naturally on the way back, and it has a place to go on the way through. And then you can, at home, you can take your left arm and let's just move it back about an inch in your stance, and immediately you're going to feel that it's a little bit stuck up against your side, doesn't want to rotate as freely on the way back, and then coming through, there's a ton of resistance. So the reaction of the resistance would be to either slow the arm down and have the toe pass the heel, and that's going to create a pull, or to get the arm away from you to create some freedom, and that's going to lead to a push. So if you're going to err in ball position, you want to err, slightly too far up versus slightly too far back, because you still have that freedom in the left arm if you're a little too far up, and you're gonna make a better stroke automatically.
Pat, how much does with ball position do you feel you see a lot of things in magazines, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners read a lot of this, but how does eye dominancy play a factor in ball position, and how do you sort of talk about that kind of setup when people are talking about left and right eye dominant?
I don't know, Cody. Here's what I do know, that if your ball position is correct, not your eyes aren't going to be over the ball. We already talked about that, but your left eye is going to be pretty much even with the ball. Your nose is going to be over the shaft, and then your right eye is going to be, lined up with towards the back of the putter, and that's where your perception is, let's say, the most natural. If you get it too far back in your stance, essentially you're too far ahead of the ball with your eyes and your upper body, and that creates a weird matchup and perception's off. So I've seen both. I've seen left eye dominant people have it too far back, and I've seen right, and so I don't necessarily know if there's a direct correlation, but I do know that regardless, if your ball position is too far back, it's not going to work out for you very well. So free up that left arm. If you're a man, usually you have a seam on the left side of your zipper, and that's where I like to see my wrist on my left arm, the grip of the putter just hanging off that left seam. And you can feel it right away when it's free, and you can feel it when it starts to get trapped. So if you don't have that seam, you can still become aware of it.
That's great. And how about, so that's with somebody setting up, your target is sort of balanced 50-50 left side versus right side in terms of distribution?
Yes, I think so. Your shoulders are relatively level. Your right shoulder is always going to be a little bit lower. You see that sometimes. We covered that a little bit in alignment too, but if you bend too far to the right, you're used to playing a lot of golf or hitting a lot of drivers. Your right shoulder, your trail shoulder, let's say, is considerably lower than your lead shoulder, then that's going to create some resistance too. So that's going to put you too far back weight-wise. So level out, then take your grip, and then again, you're going to be able to move really freely from there. And that's, it goes back to that water bottle test or the weighted ball test. You can check your setup and your freedom of movement with that. If you tilt too far one way or the other, you're not going to be free. If you find neutral, you're going to be super free.
So in building on that, and that's such good information, because I think what we've seen is taking that setup, taking that ball position, and once you get somebody in that setup, doesn't that just help them, like you said, perceive the target line better, and at the end of the day, help their aim be more consistent?
It sure does, and that segues into walking into the ball, and it may be a little challenging to picture this at home, but let's take a hardwood floor model again, so people can do this at home. So you've got the ball on one line of the hardwood floor. And then if you drew a line perpendicular to that ball, when you walk into the ball, if you leave your left foot even with that line initially before you take your stance, then when you take your stance, take your steps, your ball position is more likely than not going to be correct. It'll be more towards your left foot, essentially, not too far back. Here's what I see a lot when people walk into the ball. They walk into it and their trail foot for a right-handed golfer, their right foot is more even with the ball. So they're already essentially ahead of the ball, ahead of the start line, perpendicular. So then when they take their stance, two things happen. They are closed off to their line, most likely, and the ball is too far back. And I see that every day. And then once you're in that setup, again, subconsciously you're a wreck because you know you're too far ahead of it. So it's not going to start on line right away. And you can try to correct it mid-stroke, but it usually doesn't work out very well. So what I like to have people do when they walk into the ball is, even if they're going to exaggerate, I want the tip of the left foot or the lead foot, the middle of the shoe, I want that even with the ball. And then when you put your putter behind the ball and you take your stance, then you take relatively even steps with your feet, then your ball position is going to be automatic and your perception is going to be correct when you look at your target, and then everything calms down. So that's a huge point, and I'm glad you got that one out of me too. Thank you.
Well, this has been the Putting Couch, and we've been talking to Pat O'Brien. We always want more. It has been the 20-year anniversary of Payne Stewart's dramatic win at the U.S. Open at Pinehurst. Pat, I know we've seen that memorable putt many, many times this year, and your friendship with Payne Stewart really is what led you to this career. And watching how Payne Stewart sort of used a SeeMore putter to build these fundamentals that had been sort of lacking in his more streaky putting game. So maybe you can just touch on that real quickly, and then maybe next time we can talk a little bit about how the SeeMore putter really helps you get golfers into a lot of these positions that we're talking about. So, I guess real quickly, Payne Stewart had a system that he built around that SeeMore putter. And when he did these types of things that you're talking about, the ball slightly forward, posture, everything, that SeeMore putter, that FGP putter that he had sort of left him in the good spots.
It did. He would occasionally, when I watched him play, well, before, he was always off to the side of the green, just making practice strokes, trying to find a feel for that day. And then when he got a SeeMore, he got a system, and it was super consistent right away. I mean, heck, he won the first event he ever played, putting that SeeMore into play. But what he would do is he would hold the putter up out in front of him, parallel to the ground, and just sort of center it and then just fall into his posture from there. And that was his way of getting everything pretty much square neutral. And so you'd see him practice that once in a while. And that was his easy way to get back on track. And truth be told, when I watched him, he was pretty much always on track that last year of his life. I mean, his putting was incredible, and it was consistent day after day, because you're right, Jim, he had a system and there was no guesswork. And the advantage of the system is, you can fix yourself and you don't need another set of eyes. And when you get off, you go fix it right away. But day to day, you're just consistent and you see putts go in because you're starting them on line, and then that gives you confidence and it snowballs from there. So yeah, having a system is wow. And not having one and guessing every day. And a lot of guys at a high level do that too, or they change putters or whatever. They might get streaky once in a while, but oftentimes they leave the golf course frustrated.
Well, having this opportunity to talk to you, Pat, is fantastic, and I know our listeners are going to love it. So, again, we've been talking to Pat O'Brien, SeeMore's global putting ambassador, the director of instruction at Lakewood Country Club in Dallas, Texas, and really the father of a lot of modern ideas when it comes to putting instruction. So, Pat, great to have you on today, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.
We appreciate you joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the show, make sure you do wherever you're listening. Be sure to leave a rating and review because that's how we get the Putting Couch podcast content in front of more people. Also, take a screenshot and share it on social media and tag us at SeeMore Putters or hashtag Team SeeMore.